Okay, I hope we're live. I hope we're okay. So we'll start very, very soon or now. And today's discussion in live stream format, my dear friends, is this film Karate Kid Part 2. So uh, thank you very much for joining, and we will begin momentarily. Okay. I hope all is well, by the way. And there's also the chat as well, in case you want to join in to the conversation. Hold on for 1 second. How's everyone doing today, by the way? I hope all is well. I'm very excited about this kind of continuation of what we were talking about, I think, 2 weeks ago, with regard to the set of films. So beginning with the Karate Kid, which we talked about 2 weeks ago. So continuing the conversation. So in any event, let us begin. But we'll begin in about a few minutes, just to get everyone settled in. But once again, the topic of discussion today is this film, 1986, right? And this is the film, The Karate Kid Part Two. And so we will be talking about this in earnest. The live stream chat is available for people to step in and give us their thoughts or your thoughts about this very memorable film from the 1980s. And I'll try to explain some of the reasons why I think it's very memorable. And I know that I'm not the only one who holds this film in a certain degree of high regard. And so I will, of course, defer to your comments, my dear friends, should you choose to make them about this film. But let us begin actually with a few comments. Let's see, I know some people have arrived. So, Juan, hello, good morning, good afternoon, greetings. I hope all is well. And Sean, it's great to be able to connect with you earlier in the week. So, thank you so much. And I have to get back to you with my responses to your questions. I apologize for not getting back to you sooner, but thank you. Oh, and thank you for checking the audio and video. That's good. That's good. I always have technical difficulties with these things. So Vern, oh, I remember you were saying something about how it was difficult, but I'm so glad you're here. Oh, that's so cool. Awesome, awesome. Timothy, oh, that's great too. I'm so glad you made it as well. Awesome. And Seth, oh, it's nice to see you. Yes. And okay, we will talk about this thing that happened 6 months later after the end of the Karate Kid. We'll talk about this thing with the car and Ali and UCLA. We'll talk about this. Okay, yes, but very good point. Yes, thank you very much. Oh yes, and that's also a good point. You say you end it with honk. Yes, well done. Although that's one of the great mysteries and questions that I have about this film, The Karate Kid Part Two, which I hope to try to reach some kind of uh, resolution, at least in my own mind, going forward. Is it honk or is it ha? So and I really mean that in terms of my consideration. I've thought about this question since I was a kid, actually. But in any event, my dear friend, thank you so much. I think actually, just to take a step back, I think maybe in taking in like recent developments, shall we say, maybe it's honk rather than ha. But we'll see, we'll see. In any event. I have a little theory about that I'll try to talk about. But anyway, my dear friend, thank you so much. So, and Matt, oh, hello, hello. It's nice to see you, Matt. Hello, greetings. Yes, Timothy, I agree. I absolutely agree. I like those types of, films very much. And then Davy, awesome, highly entertaining sequels for sure. I agree. I absolutely agree. So, all right. So let us begin in earnest, my dear friend. So, hold on, drop something here. And now I'm back. So let us begin in earnest, my dear friends. So greetings from LA. It's Daisuke. And I very much hope that everything is well with you. And today, let us continue with the live stream conversations because we are live. We're live, at least at the time of the broadcasting of this live stream, we're live. And today, the topic of conversation is this film from 1986, John Avildsen film starring Robert Mark Kamen and starring Ralph Macchio and Noriyuki Pat Morita and others. This is the 1986 film, which is The Karate Kid Part 2. So, my dear friends, The Karate Kid Part 2. I have a number of things to say about it. I don't hold myself out to be in any way an expert when it comes to The Karate Kid Part 2 or any film for that matter, but I don't know all the inside information. I don't have all the details. I haven't studied this film with any degree of, say, academic intensity or anything of that sort. But I have seen this film a number of times, and in fact, saw it when it was first released in 1986. So I went to see it. My mom took me to see it in the movie theater when it was shown. So I still have memories of this, and I still remember the. Well, okay, I'll save those comments a little bit later. But before we get into those comments in earnest, just some preliminaries. So we will be talking about the Karate Kid Part 2. So anything that was Karate Kid Part 2 specific, plot specific, including the ending of the Karate Kid Part 2, that is fair game today. So we will be speaking about many plot details of this really entertaining film. If you have not seen the Karate Kid Part 2, then please turn this live stream off and then watch the Karate Kid Part 2. You can always come back to this as a replayable video on my YouTube channel later, if you so choose. But we will be talking about Karate Kid Part 2 spoilers. And in fact, we will also need to rely on knowledge of The Karate Kid, the film from '84, the first film. So my understanding will be you will have seen The Karate Kid and you will have seen The Karate Kid Part 2. So my comments today will be based upon those assumptions. So, yes, so a spoiler warning for Karate Kid and The Karate Kid Part 2. All right, so if you, and that goes for any of the comments here. But I will not be speaking about anything after The Karate Kid Part 2. So I won't be speaking directly about any of the other films or anything after the film. So I might be making very, very veiled, nuanced, very covered up references, perhaps, maybe slightly, who knows. But I will try to, or I will definitely make sure that I say nothing that will be speaking about anything beyond the end of the Karate Kid Part 2. So no worries, hopefully, to anyone who has still to progress through your Karate Kid journey, whether it's with the feature films and beyond. So. But just let's keep that in mind. That's the first thing. Is spoiler alert for the Karate Kid, and primarily for the Karate Kid Part 2. And then the next thing is the live chat is open. The chat function is open, so you can please, of course, feel free to leave your comments and questions in the chat. I'll try my best to say hello to everyone. If I miss you or I miss your comment by accident, then please forgive me. It's not my intention to create any kind of ill will between us or among us, but I apologize. I make mistakes quite often. So, and I do a lot of oversight and mishaps. So I apologize for that. So I might skip you or I might skip your comment, but it's no ill will is meant on my part, believe me. But I do apologize in advance for that. But I will try to say hello to everyone who is here. And then also, I will, if it's okay, I would like to focus my attention on Karate Kid Part 2 questions and comments. So I know I know there might be questions where people might be curious about other non-Karate Kid topics and the like. So thank you very much for expressing an interest and curiosity as to how I might feel about a certain viewpoint or topic. Please let me, if it's okay, just focus my energy today, or at least these next couple hours, on the Karate Kid Part 2. So if you have any non-Karate Kid Part 2 questions, then I might just very gently skip over it, or I'll try to address it as best I can. Again, within the context of the Karate Kid and the Karate Kid Part 2 mainly. And that also goes for Karate Kid Part 3 specific questions, the next Karate Kid specific questions, Cobra Kai specific questions. I will very gently just leave them aside for the time being, if that's okay. But I have seen the Cobra Kai series up to the most. I'm up to date with that, so I kind of know what happens with that storyline or those storylines. But for now, I want to focus on the Karate Kid. So, and then last but certainly not least, I always am grateful to you, my dear friends, always for. Your kind comments and comments of curiosity and questioning and pushback and even debate and disagreement. I'm always welcoming of that. And thank you always very much for wherever you leave comments behind, whether it's in the live chat or in the comment section on YouTube or any other places. You always do so with a sense of integrity and also a sense of mutual respect towards others. Even when there's disagreement, even when there's pushback, there's always a sense of mutual respect, and I very much appreciate that. And I'm very fortunate. I've always considered myself very fortunate to be able to to have relied on you and your wonderful sense of decorum and pace of discussion. So thank you very much for always showing a deal of mutual respect towards everyone. And I will rely upon you and your goodwill and your good habits and judgments to carry along with the live chat conversation in the chat room here as well going forward. So thank you very much in advance for your very kind consideration for that. I always rely on you and your wonderful sense of welcomeness and alertness. So thank you very much in advance. So with that, my dear friends, let us begin in earnest, excuse me for the sip of coffee, with a discussion of the Karate Kid Part 2. But before then, let's go to the chat and we will continue on forward. Juan, yes, the first person in the room, so thank you very much again. The thing I like most about this film, more so than the first, is the immersion in the Japanese culture. Yes, that is one aspect that we will address as well, how it takes the story or takes these characters, in particular the Mr. Miyagi character, and it really delves into a further backstory into his character. Although what's interesting, I might be, and I'll try to control myself here for purposes of saving this later, but what's interesting about that is it is a slightly different type of backstory than what we had been hinted at when we recall the backstory of him and the tragedy that befell his family and his valor in war, etc. And so it is a slightly different trajectory, or it is a even further part of his life, maybe outside of this, or maybe in maybe tangential to this, but also separate from this. So that is an also very interesting topic that I'll try to maybe address in terms of how I feel about that. But that's a really good point, Juan. Benny, my dear friend, thank you so much, and thank you very much for your continued messages. Very, very detailed messages. You know, I hope you know what I'm referring to, so thank you. I remember so many people that really wanted another Karate Kid movie. There was a mass of fans hungry for the release in the 1980s. Yes, it was a really, really popular film, and I remember when this film came out. Again, I was very young. I was 86. I would have been 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old, and it was all over the TV. I think Nickelodeon was still there at the time, and so they had, I think, movie review shows for the Nickelodeon audiences, so the kids audience. And so I remember being able to watch that, and the Karate Kid was. I remember interviews with Ralph Macchio and Tamlin Tomita about, and they were talking about the dance scene that they were doing, a rock around the clock dance scene in the dance hall there, and really great dancing, by the way. But yeah, so it was really big. Oh yes, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. One says, or should I say, Okinawan culture? Yes, that's also a very good point too, because maybe slightly related to, but also different from this film. And I'll try to express this as well, but there is a way in which this film could be said. Yes, it is very specifically saying Okinawa, so Okinawa, and indeed, in fact, while I wouldn't necessarily go so far to say that this film is across the board 100% accurately representing what quote unquote Okinawa culture is, end quote, because there's, I think, a lot of aspects of it that is done in a way that is a type of perception of what it could be, or something that might be, for lack of a better phrase, trying to fine tune a sense of marketability about how the story is being told in this Hollywood context versus what it might be. Now, I don't mean that in any negative context, at least for now, but I'm just saying those are kind of the impressions, right? So um, but that being said, it is also, I think, the case that stepping outside of this film, there is like something to be said about when you go to Japan now. If you go, say, to the large island called Honshu Island, or you go to Tokyo, or go to the area in and around the Tokyo area, you'll note, or at least I do, that the way that Japanese culture, quote unquote, that is expressed in many aspects that are shown, say, in Tokyo, or the Tokyo area is the cosmopolitan part hub here, the capital city, are similar yet different from many aspects that one might encounter if one visits Okinawa, Naha, and other parts of Okinawa in this present day. So I've only been to Okinawa, I think, let's see, I've been there twice. I've been there twice in my yes, I've been there twice in my life. So I've never lived in Okinawa, but and I haven't been to all parts of Okinawa, but there are aspects of it that feel quite unique in terms of kind of culture and status and aspects of history that could be said also to be quite distinct and unique from so-called quote unquote maybe history of quote unquote Japan. And I'm using quote unquote a lot here because I want to relay a sense of there's a kind of nuanced complexity about here as well, which may or may not come up in the discussion here, but I just want to keep that in mind here. But with all that, yes, we also understand that the film is the film, and it's telling the story in the way that it seeks to tell the story, which is also what I'll try to address as well. But yes, Juan says the funeral of Miyagi's father always gets me. Yes, me too. Me too. That is a very, and also the reaction of Miyagi on the sitting alone on the rocks there. But then Daniel comes to him at this moment of uh, such profound sadness and loss, and he's there for his friend. So, but yeah, it's really great, it's poignant, touching moment between these two, which is one of the great strengths of this film. Danny, oh, it's great to see you, Danny, my dear friend Danny. Yes, oh, Seth, well, thankfully Daniel isn't Arnie Cunningham. Oh, there's a Christine reference there. I like that. Um, and Sean says, I didn't like this film as much as the first one, but I think it does have the heart and soul that the original had in terms of Daniel and Mr. Miyagi's relationship. That's a really great way, excuse me, of it's a really great way of expressing it, Sean. And I think I might have a very, very similar sense about this film as you do. Komodo, hello. Hi, I enjoyed the first two films. They're modern fairy tales. I wonder how they'd be if Takeshi Kitano had played Miyagi. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, yeah, that would be quite maybe very different films indeed. Talk about the confrontation between Miyagi and Kreese that starts the film. My goodness, but anyway, the enemy deserves no. Anyway, and it's all cut to show like still reactions of like Daniel like that, and then cut back, you know, in the great editing step. But anyway, Jason, oh, it's nice to see you. Good morning from Brooklyn. I'm a big fan of this film. My wedding vows even included some. Oh, great! Of course, I am the man who will fight. Yes. Ah, it's great. I posted to Instagram yet last night to announce this live stream, so I used a little clip from the song that Instagram permitted me to use. So we did it all for the glory of like a knight in shining armor from a long time ago. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yes. Who won't be moved by such great lyric? I really, it's one of the great songs that accompanies any film, I think. It's like it's kind of like you know. Um, like kind of like what is it? Huey Lewis in the News and Back to the Future. It's that kind of iconic status with this film. Yes, but oh, okay, liver dot. Yes, okay, all right. This is a good place, Seth, my dear friend, to get into this. So, The Karate Kid Part Two. I saw this in the theater when I was a kid, and it was 1986, and so we were still living in the United States at the time, the East Coast, and it was it was a really great it was a great time, I think, to be a film lover, or even just being able to go to the movie theaters. Because I said there was a lot of buzz and hype around this, at least as far as I remember. And again, my memory is hazy in a lot of places, and even with this experience, but it was something that, as I mentioned before, I remember seeing movie shows, review shows on Nickelodeon kids programs or something, where they would be showcasing and reviewing this film. I remember it was the scene involving the ice in the bar, and then it would be like they're showing the thing, and it was like the clip. You know how they show clips of the films and the reviews in order to entice people to go. Well, they actually showed the clip where he breaks the entire ice block, and then he goes, yeah, and then he breaks it, and it freezes on him just breaking it. But any event, I remember that and watching the film in the theater, having a wonderful time. I remember also getting my mom bought me the book, the kids novelization of the film The Karate Kid Part Two. So it wasn't super thick in terms of page count, but it was a it was a novelization, a kids book novelization. That was, I think, the first novelization I remember reading of a film, and so I read that, and I was reading it. I read so many times over and over again, and I was reading it, and I read to the end, and I started back it again, and I read it. I kept reading it, and I just reread it, I think, 3 times or so. And actually, this brings me to a point. I actually told this to one of my teachers, because I was going to school at the time, right? And I said to I guess something. I remember saying to my teacher, "I'm reading this book, The Karate Kid Part Two, and I'm rereading it. I'm reading it over and over. It's so exciting." And I remember my teacher saying to me at the time, "Why are you rereading the book? You shouldn't be rereading the book." That's what my teacher said to me. So my heart broke at that particular moment, because my teacher did not was very not encouraging in terms of rereading the book that I had of Karate Kid Part Two. But I must say that in spite of such words, I remained defiant, and I kept rereading the Karate Kid Part Two novelization until I was able to get my hands on the Karate Kid novelization of the earlier film, which I was able to do after the fact of getting the Karate Kid Part Two novelization for kids. And it was really that Karate Kid novelization for kids was a little bit longer, it was a little bit more page numbers, but I think it was a good step. Although it was going back to the film prior to the Karate Kid Part Two, I think it was a good step in terms of a slight increase in reading comprehension and reading level, etc. But for any teachers out there who see your students reading the Karate Kid Part Two novelization, don't be discouraging. In fact, please encourage your students to read more. Perhaps the teacher that I had was just maybe a very unfortunate rare case, but and I know, and I like to think that maybe other teachers will be opposite in terms of in fact being very encouraging of allowing their kids to read the Karate Kid Part Two novelization. But in any event, that was my experience as a kid, all encompassing with regard to the Karate Kid Part Two, in many formats, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly. I absolutely enjoyed myself thoroughly with this. I thought Chosen was he was such a like when he does the thing with his muscles, and it's like maybe sometime later I saw the film. Predator. Predator with the great right Carl Weathers, right? Great Carl Weathers, legend, and will be greatly missed. Carl Weathers, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And there's a scene early on in the film Predator where you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers essentially bicepping off, here's my muscle, here's your muscle. So whenever I saw that scene in Predator, I always think back to Chosen, because Chosen has some pretty, I think, quite impressive physique in terms of the muscles and stuff. So, in any event, yes, I think when I watch Predator, I automatically think of the Karate Kid Part Two and Chosen. So, it was one of the most legendary villains in Karate Kid history or cinema history, let me say. And we will of course talk more about Chosen and his I think really great characterization as a villain here in this film. Following up that, but I as a kid watching Chosen, I was so swept up with that drama. I was swept up with the connection between Daniel and Kumiko. And I mentioned at the last live stream, but you know who I was a kid with the tea ceremony scene. I was a kid watching that, and I was a kid, you know, and the dance scene and everything. But I was a but and then she takes the pin out, and they have their wonderful kiss as the typhoon is coming. And after the end of the tea ceremony, and the camera slowly pans back, or whatever the technical term is, and this is probably for me the kiss between Kumiko and Daniel after the end of the tea ceremony. This is probably the and you know if you disagree with me, of course, fine. It could be one of the, but for me, it's probably the greatest ultimate 80s kiss scene that I can recall. This is 80s. This is the 80s kiss or scene of the ages. I think that's so great. It's so great, and so and you know, maybe I like many people as a kid watching this film. I had a huge crush on Kumiko after this. It was just um, amazing, absolutely amazing. And then, of course, we have Mr. Miyagi and going to Okinawa and going to Tomi Village, which is the name that is prescribed here in the story, and seeing his return after many years, and the rivalry that emerges between him, or that has reemerged, or we are reminded of it, or we are learning about it, and in terms of the love triangle between him and Yukie, and also Sato, who's this, oh my gosh, um, you know that Sato means business when he takes off his sunglasses. My goodness, you know he means business with the sunglasses, and he means business without the sunglasses. I mean, that is the kind of heavy stature that Sato has. I mean, he's and the I mean, the rivalry that he has, the beef that he has with Mr. Miyagi. My goodness. It's pretty intense. It's pretty intense indeed. But I was swept up with these plot points and others, as well as you know, aspects of Daniel's own journey, his journey, or maybe the end of the journey, as it was when we realize what happens with him and Allie at the start of the film, kind of. And then also what happens in terms of his own personal growth throughout the film. And I think it was highlighted in a comment that's already been left. You know, I think there are some critical points that I'll probably make about this. There are some criticisms that I have about this film that I'll try to make a little bit later. But despite those, or notwithstanding the criticisms that I might have about this film personally, I think that the main strength of this is the Daniel Mr. Miyagi relationship, which is so wonderfully charming, and it feels like it's still growing. You know what I mean? It feels like it's still on a journey. It doesn't feel like it's something that it reached a point at the end of the Karate Kid and it stalls there. I feel like we're learning more about Mr. Miyagi's past as Daniel is, and Daniel is becoming. He's trying to see how he can help his friend in certain ways, which I always find very touching and warming and moving. And then we also see how he is making friends with other people in this community, as well as making enemies. Which goes to the chosen Daniel rivalry, which is more chosen than anyone else. But the that vegetable stand scene, my goodness. I mean, um, yeah. But anyway, all right. So though there's a lot here in terms of my own personal feelings and expressions about this, and I've seen this over the years, ever since 1986, and so it's been a lot of fun revisiting it. Maybe as I've been getting older, there have been aspects of it that I recognize even now that there's a little bit of a tug that I feel. We'll talk a little later about maybe certain aspects that it represents represents maybe cultural representations, etc. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I'm still able to watch this film, and maybe criticisms notwithstanding. I don't know if I watch it and ignore the criticisms, but I'm able to watch it, and even encompassing those criticisms, I'm still always able to have a wonderful time with this film, a really, really wonderful time with this. So that's my general 2 cents when it comes to just my approach to this film, or how I first came to this film. But before I get into specifics, let's see here. Callum, my dear friend, I haven't seen this film in years. It's so good, almost up there with the first one for me. Yes, yes. Juan, regarding the relationship between Daniel and Miyagi, specifically how Miyagi could be from time to time be taking the role of the father. I love how he takes Daniel to some extremes. That's right. That's really good. Yes, he does take Daniel to some extremes. I mean, I'll talk about it here. Okay, so there's this thing about the teachings of karate, Miyagi-Do karate, as it's and then aspects of the history of the karate and the Miyagi family and Okinawa and his father, but also generations prior to his own father, and bringing the philosophy and martial arts karate, which was in terms of the story and Shimpo and the story of China and Okinawa, and then how it ended up becoming karate in the form that we understand Mr. Miyagi knows it, and is now bestowing upon his pupil, his student, and his friend Daniel. So we have this flow of karate, which is also referred to a little bit in the film itself. There are moments of fighting practice, or martial arts practice in dojos, and then referring to pictures that represent the family lineage, Miyagi family lineage. So the Shimpo reference is also made at some point, etc. But there are a lot of extremes. Like I didn't realize how extreme this was, but okay, Daniel, let's practice the drum technique. All right, Mr. Miyagi, how are we going to do this? Okay, Daniel, here's what we're going to do. I want you to stand on this wooden piece of wood. Okay, I'll stand. I mean, outside on this pier. Yeah, yeah. This is just a regular sort of fishing pier. Not a problem. I want you to stand on this piece of wood, Dan. Okay, what do you want me to do? And then I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna pull this rope. Okay, what's gonna happen if you pull? When I pull this rope, this old rusty hook is gonna fly at you. Okay, what should I do? Oh gosh. And that's the whole thing with teaching him the drum technique, is essentially he has to maneuver his body in order to learn the drum technique, or he's going to become impaled by this rusty spike. So this is, I think, a far cry from the types of, oh, let's clean the cars, let's wax the cars in order to learn the lessons about martial arts defense, in terms of the motion of the arms, the right arm and the left arm, the left right hand and the left hand, or maybe painting the fence. I mean, these are, considerably speaking, a lot less lethal than standing on a pole and potentially being impaled by a rusty spike on a fishing pier. So in that way, I think, yes, there is a lot of extreme situation that's happening here, which as a film, of course, you go with the flow and you understand, oh, nothing's going to happen in terms of actually being impaled. But it would be interesting to consider the extreme case of what actually if Daniel had been impaled on that spike on the pier when he was trying to learn the drum technique, which is essentially to move your body in order to avoid the combatant, or to avoid the attack, which I completely understand. It's very much part of the flow of what one might call Miyagi-Do, in terms of defense is the best form of attack. Although what's interesting is in fact this is supposed to be emblematic of the drum, the den drum, which is the small drum with the two pieces of string with kind of hard objects affixed to the end of each string. And when you twist the drum, you have the balls hitting both sides of the drum faces. So you have this thing which is supposed also to be emblematic of the drum technique, right? Which is the key technique that will close out the climax of the film. But what's interesting is that I think the fight at the end, and I'm getting way ahead of myself, I apologize, but the fight at the end with Chosen and Daniel, right? It's this is not tournament, this is for real, right? That's the words, the wise and quite eerie words, ominous words of Mr. Miyagi before Daniel-san goes to the middle of this little rock island and then fights Chosen essentially to the death, kind of. And then we have the final moment after the crane technique has failed, because Chosen, apparently, if the crane technique we heard from the first Karate Kid, if you do it right, it has no defense. Well, it looked to me that Daniel was about to, he set it up, he did it right, but Chosen was able to fend it off. He grabbed the foot and threw it, flung him aside, and shifted his balance off, so he fell over. So either Daniel did it wrong, or there is in fact a way to defy the otherwise undefendable crane technique. But in any event, I don't know which is the case. Actually, it might be the former rather than the latter. But going back to the drum technique. So okay, so before with the whole spiky, heavy, impalable spike thing at the fishing pier training. Now we have the drum, which is sort of the moment of the final message, right? Miyagi actually calls out step back early on in the fight, but then he relinquishes using words, and he uses the drum instead, where everyone joins in the chorus. It's I love the shot, by the way, of Miyagi standing there and Sato standing there as well. Now they are spiritual brothers once again, and they are united over their disappointment and fear that Chosen might in fact win at this final battle. But then Daniel gets the message, and the drum starts, and he's using the drum technique not as a defense, but kind of as an attack, right? Chosen kind of motions, but Daniel doesn't use it to deflect the thing, but he's actually using it to attack him. He's like, like that, right? So, yeah, it's an interesting. I'm not quite sure where the drum technique falls in the whole context of what one might perceive to be the Miyagi-Do philosophy, at least up through the first two films. If one looks at the Miyagi-Do philosophy as type of defense as attack, then maybe this drum technique works. But in fact, actually, it seems more attackish than defense as attack to me. At least how Daniel-san seems to be interpreted. Although maybe, of course, that's also might be an aspect of Miyagi-Do, which is try to adapt as much as possible. But in any event, I'm sorry. Why did I talk? Oh, yes, because extremes. Yes, of course, as one says, there seem to be a lot of extremes here with that. But there's also, I think, less of the sort of wax on, wax off moments in this. And there's more focusing in on the Chosen storyline, Kumiko story, or Miyagi storyline. It sort of enters and then recedes in favor of the Daniel storyline, which then recedes when Chosen comes in, and Sato, of course, comes in and goes back to Yukie and Mr. Miyagi, etc. So there are these the kind of ebb and flow stories that enter and then recede in favor of other storylines, and I think that there's also room here and there for the quote unquote karate training scenes, but I would say that there are less of those wax on, wax off, paint the fence, sand the floor moments. There are less of those in this film than there were in the earlier film. But that doesn't make it, I think, in that respect, any less, any kind of less superior, in fact. But it also goes to what I was saying before about the first film, which I don't regard either the first film or the second film or any of the films. I don't regard them as martial arts films. And so I don't look at them in terms of the martial arts choreography, but I look at them as wonderful and pieces of entertainment that are really absorbing, very entertaining, and that involve this storytelling aspect of the universe. That is how karate is very important to the lives of these people, and it's important to Miyagi. But we also understand it's important to Sato, and we also understand that there is the key link between the two of them that is made by karate, because we understand that the pupil, right, their teacher was the father, Mr. Miyagi. So in that way, they become spiritual brothers via karate, which is, we understand too, with the very brief glimpse of what we understand of how karate is passed down from generation to generation to generation in the line of in the Miyagi lineage. That was a really big deal, apparently. So this is Sato becomes in many ways a kind of spiritual brother, which makes his revenge tale against Miyagi very Shakespearean, incredibly Shakespearean, and his fall from a type of almost villainous hubris is quite Shakespearean. But it's wonderful to see the resolution of his character arc, Sato's character arc, at the end, at least in terms of the storm and everything, which we'll talk about as well. I'm sorry, I'm getting totally carried away with myself, but yeah. Yeah. So anyway, extremes. You're absolutely right, Juan. I agree. Yes, that's right, Juan. And you're right. This is not a tournament. This is real. That's right. I agree. That's, I think, probably the best example of this. That's probably the better example than the one I raised in terms of the rusty spike that could kill you. But anyway, yes. And Davey, yes, Daniel and Mr. Maggie bravely saving the little girl and Sato during the torrential rainstorm is a fantastic film sequence. Yes, yes. And let me just say again, I'll try to be as vague and ambiguous as possible, but um, the young girl is very very fortunate, very lucky that Daniel was able to save her how he did in this typhoon or storm. But maybe Daniel might also be considering himself lucky as well. And I'll just leave it at that. And yes, yes, completely. Yes, gleaming TV. Yes, yes. I usually try to. I like to do impressions, but it's a little bit difficult for me to do impressions here with the Karate Kid films. I love the film so much, but I kind of have to resist doing it for certain reasons. But yes, I know this line very well. Yes, Sato's the guttural, the way that like I don't know what's going on. Like Sato's throat muscles are in a league of their own. The fact that his throat is able to sustain all that guttural like language that he's able to speak, the hatred in his voice, it's utterly just epic, absolutely epic. I mean, he, you know, it's what's his name? I haven't seen the films yet, but I kind of know what's going on. You know, was it the Avengers films? He kind of looks like Thanos, you know, in terms of the look and the imposing nature of him. But anyway, really imposing character, really imposing villain. I think he's really great. And Sean says, I liked how quiet and meditative the tea scene was. It was well. And there were two tea scenes as well, right, between Yukie and Mr. Miyagi, which Kumiko and Daniel sort of sort of look in on, show a kind of romantic connection between them, which is then paralleled, of course, later between Daniel and Kumiko later. So really nice. Time capsule. Hello. You say Karate Kid 2. I remember really well. I saw both 1 and 2 in the theater. Both very memorable. That's cool. Me too. Absolutely. Me too. Yes. Let's see. Sean says, also, it shouldn't have taken me out of the film, but not seeing Ali after the tournament really shocked me. Okay. It made me think about how not every actor in the original film returns to the sequel. Okay. That's great, Kenny. Thank you for. So let's get into. This will be a great way to jump off of in terms of how this film starts. Okay. This film starts with a great opening montage of the first film. And I think it was Timothy who said it earlier about how you like to see films that are sequels that start pretty much where the last film ended. Which I also, that's one of the cool things about this film too, which is it's the production, it was made a couple of years after the first film was made, but the continuity I think is really well set up. And the tournament and a whole scenes involving the first film, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel meeting in the first film, that's set up in the great opening title sequence, which I really love. All the way down to the tournament and the final climactic scene, and then Daniel, of course, winning. We do see some shots, not all, but we do, especially at the end. I think we have to see Ali running in jubilation after Daniel has won the final against Johnny at the end of the first film. So, but it's a great title sequence, and it goes into I think the end of the tournament, or as Daniel is showering and changing, and he's still got the limp, right, because he sustained a leg injury during the final two fights that he did in the tournament, the All Valley tournament. And so we see him, and I love the bit with the kids, and he signs the autograph from the kids, and I'm from Reseda. I'm from Reseda. Oh, we're all from Reseda. Yeah, we're from Reseda. And Mr. Mix, oh, come on. We can't keep your mom and Ali waiting, who are, yes, they didn't appear in the film, but, they are waiting for us at the restaurant. So we've got to go and meet them at the restaurant. So that always stuck out to me because you realize that they're not in the film. Especially in particular, who you mentioned, Ali. Elizabeth Shue is not appearing in the film. So yeah, so they're waiting at the restaurant, or a little bit later, 6 months later, we find out that Allie did something to the car. According to Daniel, anyway, she did something to the car with the brakes, right? And then there was some kind of something that happened between her and UCLA students. So okay, all right. So, but anyway, so that's quite a bit of a yes, quite a shocking and um, somewhat glorious way to uh, leave that character behind. After all, if we remember, Ali was a huge part of Daniel's life, and indeed our lives as viewers of the first film. And then to get this one bit of dialogue from Daniel saying that they've essentially broken up in this way. Again, it's from Daniel's perspective. Let me just put it that way. So, and it's about the brakes in the car, faulty, and then the UCLA guy. All right, so Allie's out of the picture at least 6 months later. So that's a bit of a shock yet, but yes, but it's nice to see these callbacks at the very least, and to go back to the beginning of the film again at the end, immediately post the All Valley tournament. So we have the parking lot at night. Okay, so and then the trophy that he's carrying, but then Kreese and the Cobra Kai at the other end of the parking lot, and Kreese is not happy, and we have all the Cobra Kai. I get Dutch. Dutch has got his cap on, but he's got his back turned. So I always thought Dutch wasn't what's his name, Chad McQueen. I thought it wasn't the same actor that was in the first one, but according to the credits, it appears to be the same actress. I'm not sure. I don't know why, but he's on the other side of the car. You don't never see. He's always turning his face to us. He always has his back to the camera. So I always thought he's purposely hiding his face for someone with a cap, etc. But because Dutch he didn't wear a cap. Right, but suddenly he wears a cap. What's going on? But anyway, maybe he did, and we just didn't see it in the first film. But in any event, yes, and I loved, hey, Mr. Miyagi's right. Leave him alone. I mean, but just like an hour before, you were like saying, "Oh, get him a body bag." Yeah, so that guy now saying, "Hey, yeah, Mr. Miyagi's right. Leave him alone." Johnny did his best. Leave him alone. So, like, oh gosh. So, okay. So, talk about a 180. But that's okay. That's okay. We get a lot of 180s in the world of the Karate Kid, and so Johnny and I'm not sure about Dutch, but Johnny and Tommy and okay. So I think they're given their due, and they've shown that they are. I think that they can have this essentially personal growth in terms of now being what is it in wrestling terms, it's the heel turn, or the not the heels turn to babyface, or babyface turns to heel. So essentially, the good guy or the bad guy kind of thing. So now they're on the side of they're on the good guy side, I suppose. So in any event, so yes, but now Kreese is showing like, oh, you're a loser, you're a loser. Hey, Sensei, I did my best. You're a loser, you're a loser. You're a loser, and then just really assaulting Johnny there, right? So, and it's pretty shocking, and not just Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are saying, but we see some people in the distance in the parking lot saying, "What's going on? My goodness, what's going on here?" And no one's intervening, but Mr. Miyagi does, especially now that we see Johnny, who's essentially fighting for his life. He's being strangled in this very dangerous-looking stranglehold, and his face is all red. So he could essentially be causing some serious damage, maybe near death. I don't know, but no one's stopping him. But Mr. Miyagi comes in and he's like, let him go. And Kreese gives a little bit of a, I think there's a bit of a racial epithet that's thrown in there as well, and just then that's enough. So he throws Johnny out in the way, out of harm's way. So we've got the whole sequence between cars, and then Kreese here does the Kreese thing here, and then duh duh duh. Dun, 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 dun. And then now Kreese, who is now bloody knuckled or knuckle bloodied, is now subdued, and we've got this great confrontation between Miyagi and Kreese, which we really, I think this is the great capping off of the storyline of the Karate Kid, right? Because the Karate Kid, there was a lot of the intense rivalry between between Daniel and Johnny and that core group of the Cobra Kai. But there were some scenes between Miyagi, or there's a one key scene in the Cobra Kai dojo, the first film, between Kreese and Miyagi, how Miyagi is able to fend off the gang, the Cobra Kai group, until the All Valley tournament. But that's the one bit of confrontation. But that if one were to be really, if I were to be really honest, it doesn't find its payoff until we get to this scene at the beginning of Karate Kid Part 2, which makes the scene, I think, very, very like a satisfying epilogue or denouement conclusion to the first film. So this feels like the end credit sequence of the first film, really, which is really great, or a great a pickup point for the second film. So so it works that way. And of course, we got the great moment of Miyagi with Kreese there on the ground about to strike. Enemy deserves no mercy, and it's like, oh, and Dave was like, oh, and right, and then the famous moment he brings it to the line, and Kreese has got that look like, oh. And then of course we come to the moment where he goes like this, right? Who Kreese is a huh, and then goes down, right? So this is where the question that has plagued me for years since I was a kid. It has occupied my thoughts, and I mean this very sincerely. It has occupied my thoughts for most of my life. Actually, come to think about it, most of my life. So if I was, 86, this film came out in 86. So that is what 96. That's nearly 40 years. Nearly 40 years. So a majority of my time here on Earth, part of that time has had me thinking about this question, which is the sound a honk or is it a honk? Honk or honk? Now, to my ears, at least the Kreese Miyagi confrontation, Miyagi says honk, not honk, but honk. But at the end of the film, when Daniel, who's got the same thing going on, now Chosen after the drum thing, drum, and after now Chosen is now subdued, and Daniel's got him, he's over him, and he's got the great. Okay, so here's another thing too. He's continuing on with the great Daniel hand gesture. So before in the tournament in part one, he's got the great hand gesture, fighting the lion, and here he's got the hand like in this kind of his fingers hooked like this, and it's like, live or die, man, right? As Seth said in the chat, live or die, man. And then Chosen, I think, quite in terms of the sort of the overflowing of a type of, like almost bordering on hubris type of honor, right? Die, all bloody, live or die, man, die. And then Daniel's like, wrong, honk. Dun, 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 dun. So here he says honk, I think. Or not, he doesn't say honk, honk! Alright, he's a honk! So therein lies the debate. Is it huh or is it honk? And perhaps, and I'll try to be as vague as possible, perhaps there might be some thing that happens in, say, a TV series later down the line that might or might not be addressing something quite similar to this. But to this day, I've always been wondering, is it huh or is it honk? Now, maybe it's really huh, because maybe, Miyagi said huh, but Daniel was not so close during the parking lot confrontation at the start of the film. So maybe he couldn't hear. Maybe he was so far away that he couldn't clearly hear Miyagi say huh. Maybe Daniel thought he said honk, and so he took that with him and he used that honk. So maybe I'd like to think maybe this is something, and I'd like to think maybe Miyagi's done this before elsewhere. Maybe I don't think this is the first time he's done this. He's probably done this with other people other than Kreese. So if Miyagi has, gotten into some confrontations, because he doesn't like to go into confrontations directly. He likes to sort of sidestep it, as we know. Essentially, that's the whole story between him and Miyagi and him and Sato and Yuki. Essentially, he was confronted with essentially basically being with this person who was arranged to be with Sato, and Sato, from Sato's perspective, it's like you're basically coming in the middle of my relationship with this person. What are you doing? Maybe between Yuki and Miyagi was maybe different, so, but from Sato's perspective, it's like, what are you doing? So from Sato's perspective, he's like, I want to basically settle this between you and me together. But Miyagi kind of ran away. That's at least the story that Sato has. But that's also in many respects how Miyagi kind of represents himself. But because he doesn't look at it as facing confrontation in this direct way, but he always finds a sort of indirect way to face confrontation. So I'd like to think that maybe the ha is another way that he indirectly is able to diffuse very high intense situations. Although we haven't seen the ha technique anywhere, but maybe outside of the frame of the Karate Kid film universe. Maybe he's done it before, but who knows anyway. So that is a question that has occupied my thoughts for a good portion of my life. But yeah, it's a bummer that Allie's not there. So oh gosh. Anyway, I love Allie as well. She's a great character. But anyway, Danny continues, as this film is so romantic, it's easy to develop a crush on Kumiko. Yes, that's right. And Danny says, when Kumiko says, do you think would love me? I melt every time and shout, yes, that's right. In terms of her dreams and aspirations to be a dancer. And I must say, too, that the rock around the clock dance scene between her and Daniel, that was really good. That's really, they're really good. I mean, really great. They just come in there and they're owning the dance floor. It's amazing. It's kind of like it's like the ultimate mic drop moment. I mean, it's kind of like like they're kind of like doing what Ryan Gosling did at the Oscars, perhaps. Just totally showing everyone how it should be. That kind of thing. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So they are the Ryan Gosling of Karate Kid Part 2, the Kumiko and Daniel rock around the clock dance. Let's see. Time Capsule says, my favorite scene is between Miyagi and Daniel when his father passes and Daniel consoles him and puts his arm around him, very touching and memorable. Yes, it is. And note too, I think what makes it also so touching and memorable is that Miyagi is so still and quiet. On the one hand, he's looking out. He doesn't reciprocate in terms of putting his arm back around Daniel as well, but he sits there also with his, very still. But you see his lips quiver. You see that the tears well up in his eyes. They don't drop. There's no teardrops, but the moisture wells up in his eyes. And the sunlight from the sunset, I think, or the sunrise, I'm not sure, but it captures it so. I guess it's sunrise, but it captures it so beautifully. And it makes the height of sadness that Miyagi must be feeling at this moment. So just it's incredibly emotional. And what makes it even more emotional too, as well, is that Daniel is also sharing with him a little bit about his own dad and what happened when his own dad passed away as well, and about how it was good that he was able, he wasn't there all the time. It was good that he was able to be there for his dad at those moments. That was important. And so that itself mirrors what happens with Miyagi, who we know was away from his father for so long, only now seeing him just at the point where he passes away. So he was there at the final moment. So that's the point I think Daniel is trying to convey to him. So this is really, really a lovely moment between the two of them, because it's also a reminder too about how they know, or Daniel knows exactly what needs to be said, and Miyagi also knows what needs to be said to Daniel. They have this unspoken thing with them. It reminds me too of the moment in the first film. Remember, where Daniel realizes that Miyagi was married, and the wife and the child that was about to be born died in the internment camp while he was away fighting. And so there was in one of the box in the box of memorable keepsakes that Miyagi had. There was also the insignia that we understand was very important to Miyagi in terms of his wife, etc. And then he uses that as the put on the gi that he gives to Daniel, one of the birthday presents of his 18th birthday. And Daniel knows how important this is, and Daniel says, if you want this back, I know how important this is. If you want this back, I understand. And Miyagi nods and says, I know you know. So that's that kind of moment that they both have this unspoken understanding about each other. And that, I think, is so embodied, I think, beautifully in this scene with the two of them looking out onto the waves after the passing. It's incredible, and you think too, just all the emotion that must be welling up inside Miyagi at this moment. You know, he's come back, he's seen someone that he's loved, and he's never stopped loving apparently, and he hasn't seen this woman Yukie for so many years. But he realized that she's always known where he's been, and then also his father and all the stuff that must have been happening between him and his father, let alone the additional stuff that makes it even more complex with Sato and how Sato feels and how the moment where at the point of death the father's last dying wish, his last dying breath is used to have the two of them who are sitting apart from each other or on opposite sides and their hands grasping each other, and then of course Sato rips it apart there at the end there. But that is also just it really is, that's so sad. And so all this emotional stuff within Miyagi at that moment, and he's quiet and he doesn't say anything, but you can see the tears well up and his lips move, especially as Daniel gets into a story about his own father, which is very much, I think, closely parallel to his own. So you're right. That, and it's great. And then it also then leads to other aspects where they're seen sometime later practicing in the dojo, and there's that bond is even further strengthened. You know what I mean? So it's really quite wonderful, and I think that's really good too, because that goes to one of my, it's not really criticism, but it does this. The tenor of this film is arguably different than the first film in that there is less, as I mentioned before, less of the quote unquote karate training montage moments, and there's more of the drama or the character dramas. Let's call them, some might call them the soap opera drama aspects. You can also call them very Shakespearean in that way. But there's more of that here in this film. So in that way, Miyagi as a character becomes focus, right? And then Daniel as a character becomes so good, but it's primarily, I would say, Miyagi's film in terms of the backstory that we learn about him. So that makes these scenes between the two of them, the scenes on the rock, very poignant, and makes in an interesting way the karate scenes, the training scenes, almost not out of place, but they seem like they are the sideline to the main attraction of the film, that being the human drama story of these characters. So, not to say that the human drama story wasn't there in the first film, because I think there's a certain degree in which the karate and the drama worked very well in tandem in that film as well. But I would say the gauges are slightly different, and the tenor is different in this film, but not all completely separate and completely aloof and unrelatable, but just a different tenor that struck. So. Okay, so let's keep on going here. Yes, wax the car versus lethal rusty spike. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it's pretty different there. Yeah. That's right. Danny Smith. When did they hand out the den den drums to the entire crowd? Maybe they have. I guess they must have. I guess they are things where you can keep them maybe in the band or the obi or the belt area, so you could have them tucked away there. There are pockets sometimes in these summer clothing, the traditional summer clothing that people sometimes wear to summer festivals in Japan. There are sometimes pockets, or sometimes the sleeves are big enough that you can keep certain items. So I don't I don't go to summer festivals often, but one time I went and I did wear, it was kind of in terms of the price, it was relatively cheap piece of summer festival clothing, but I did keep a water bottle in one of my sleeves. So I guess it's possible to have pockets. Yes, that's right. That's right. Kumiko, one of the great characters. Davies continues, Kumiko is a very sweet and pretty young woman. Vern says, Tamlin to me to Posy, the only actress in the 80s who could convincingly turn Daniel's head away from Elizabeth's shoe. Yes, yes. Although, there was that whole thing with UCLA and the car brakes and all that. So, but yeah. I wanted better angles of the Denden technique in the fight. The camera was framed too tight. Yes, it's been established at the beginning, secret weapon, but we never see it in all of its glory. That's right, glory of love. That's right. It does feel like a bit it does feel, if we were to continue a little bit, Danny, especially you and maybe Sean and others, will remember our last discussion. It was pretty Christopher Nolan references abound in the Karate Kid discussion. So maybe not as much Christopher Nolan references here as in the earlier film discussion. But if I were to make one here, yeah, the final fight sequence with the drum technique, it does feel kind of closely tight, very tightly edited. Maybe it's kind of like how the Batman Begins fights are edited together. One of the things that it's kind of hard to see sometimes, in the Christopher Nolan Batman Begins fight. So it's kind of like a Christopher Nolan Batman Begins fight at the very end there with Chosen and Daniel, and the not the most of it, but that very end scene, the drum technique scene that you mentioned. Anyway. Live or die, man. Live or die. And wrong. Honk! All right. There we go. I do consider the Karate Kid films as martial arts films. The soul of martial arts is in full display. The virtues, best karate inside. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. In the context of the type of expression of philosophy, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In terms, I think of if one looks at it in terms of I look at it. Maybe I look at it. I look at it the same way, and maybe we are just expressing differently the point that we are agreeing on, which is I look at it as that idea of the philosophy and the soul. That's kind of in sort of the drama and the flow of it, and then so that actually takes into consideration the sort of the meaning of martial arts and philosophy, how that's actually part of it, and in fact, the fight choreography is actually not the point, but the point is the philosophy. So in that mode of framing, I agree with you 100%. But if looking at it in terms of how action genres are marketed, action genres are understood or perceived to be in the context of films and film classification genre, I look at it less in that mode and more in the mode that I was explaining. But I completely understand what you're saying. Absolutely. Eddie, hello. It's nice to see you. The confrontation in the parking lot with the original ending of the first film. The scene is even in the original Karate Kid screenplay. Yes, I do remember this part as well. So yes, that in that way it does feel like it's a good confrontation, but or got good close to the first film, capped onto the second film. But I must say that I do like the way that the first film ends. It needed to end at that high point, and so it could have been a really great post credits sequence, but I suppose that was before the post credit sequences became popular. Davey, I've always been really fond of the X-Men film. This X-Men film has just so much heart and depth of character. Yes, I agree. And Sean, if you don't mind, what are your thoughts about part 2 being filmed in Oahu? So I understand this was shot in Hawaii, standing in for Okinawa. So not part of, this is fine. I mean, this kind of thing happens a lot, and so that's totally fine from my perspective. I'm not as representative of all of, say, Okinawa culture or Japanese culture, but for me personally, as a viewer, I don't think that was I had issue with. I mean, there are a lot of sets and a lot of places that the outdoor parts of maybe it's supposed to be Naha, or there's a sequence at the end involving the castle and on the coast there, with Sato and his all the things, all the land. He owns everything in this place, the Tomi Village. He owns everything. But anyway, yes. So all this stuff is now, to my eyes, I can recognize as a set that's constructed. But all this stuff, I don't mind that. But then you say here, everyone speaking mostly English. Yes. Do you think about these aspects as a kid when you watch it the first time? Yes. So this gets at, for me, which is, I think, my biggest criticism of this film, which is it doesn't make sense to me that the Japanese characters would be speaking English to each other. It really doesn't make any sense to me. And so there's even a point where Miyagi comes back to Tomi Village, and he goes to the home where his father is essentially on his deathbed. And Yuki is at his side, the father's side. And Yuki is so surprised to see Miyagi return after all these years. And you can see the look on her face. And she says, oyasumi na. So she begins to speak in Japanese, but then she catches herself. and then she speaks in English, in this kind of broken English, which doesn't, it would make sense if she did that to, if she did that to, maybe she thought that Miyagi was now maybe more comfortable in speaking English. After all, from her point of view, she has been away and living in California for so many years now. So maybe that's what she was doing. But or maybe she was doing it to respect those in the room who were not Japanese speakers. So Daniel, but Daniel is seen to be outside of the room there, looking in through the doorway with Kumiko, and Daniel kind of looking in. So they're not actually part of the room there. So and it's actually, arguably the stakes are much higher at this point, more so than maybe taking in consideration the language needs of Daniel at that particular moment, of course, because it's a really grave situation at that moment. So that moment doesn't make sense to me, and it gets at the heart of my biggest criticism, which is I don't like this way in which the characters speak in this way, and it does it it. I remember my mom not talking about it so much, but she was laughing a lot about it, and because she saw the film when I did in '86, and so she was laughing a lot about it. But it is something that I think for me, growing up, I'll also say this: I don't blame the Karate Kid Part Two for any of this, but I have come into a lot of situations in my own life growing up, not pleasant ones, where people have made fun of me, um, and have said things like, "Oh, you're trying to make fun of the accent," which these people who were trying to make fun of me at the time were suggesting that maybe all Japanese people have this broken English type of accent. So I could understand that in the first film because no one else in Miyagi's periphery in the first film was someone who is a Japanese speaker. But in this film, Karate Kid Part 2, we are already in the world. So it makes no sense that they speak in this way. I wish if they had gone the route of, okay, let's have everyone speak English for the benefit of those who are watching the film and maybe not don't speak Japanese. Okay, that's fine. They did a really great thing. I don't know if you know the film The Hunt for Red October, but there's a really great technique that is used in that film in order to essentially get over this situation and then to allow the characters who are speaking in language other than English to then use English as a means of being able to do this without having to rely on speaking the native language of that particular scene. So I wish they could have done a similar technique and thus allow the actors here to not have to rely on this broken English trope, accent trope, which they have to do whenever they're speaking with each. I mean, it becomes very, very, I think, just painfully too conspicuous for me. I think it was just enough. It was fine for the first film for the reasons that I've cited, but it's a little bit too much for me, which is why I I can't quite be with this film 100%. I can totally understand that, as I mentioned before. I can take that in stride and I can watch it. I'm still into it. I love the film. I very much love the film. I have no knock against the film for that. I mean, because I don't look at it as a type of, how should I put it? I don't look at this as a direct representation of me, or I don't look at it as a direct representation of my own experiences living in Japan, or this is not meant to be like a travel log of what Japan or documentary or anything like that. So I don't look at it in that way. But so in that way, I can watch it and feel very comfortable watching it and be engrossed in it and entertained by it. But I do. It does feel like a bit. You kind of, I feel like you can either go along with it or you can have a different reaction to it. Maybe some people might be offended by it. And so, anyone who loves this film, for all of its story beats and all of its character representations and everything, I applaud you for that, and I don't look at your love of this film any way negatively or anything like that. I'm not offended by it at all. I'm with you. I'm totally with you. But there are these moments where it's sometimes a little bit difficult to avoid. Now, I say I can't forget about it, but I can go along with it. And I can kind of laugh along with it, and I can take it in stride, and really go along with the beat of it very well. And it does go into a sort of a wider discussion, I think, about how certain aspects of cultural representation are to be had in various films. And I don't mean it doesn't have to go into essentially like a conversation that will go maybe in one direction this way or another direction that way, or maybe in the context of like what cultural representation and wokeism. I don't mean it in that way. I just mean it in a very general a way of storytelling, because this type of storytelling beat and structure does occur in a lot of places. It occurs in a lot of places. It even occurs in Japanese cinema, in terms of how other, say, races and ethnicities, and how those characterizations occur. Not in all Japanese cinema, but there are some examples where Japanese cinema depicts certain other non-Japanese groups in somewhat of a two-dimensional way. Let's put it that way. So it's not to say that this film, therefore, I think it should be on the chopping block or anything like that. So, but I do look at it in that way, and I have those personal feelings about it. So, but be that as it may, I can still take it in stride and laugh along with it, maybe laugh at it, and just chuckle at its maybe. It's a somewhat abrasive way of doing this, but also I understand the storytelling beats. I understand how this is meant to be this way of telling the story. And I think that the characters are so well delineated so as to overcome any maybe tendency on my part to look at their accents as being offensive to the point where I can't enjoy the film. No, 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 no. Sato's character is so well drawn. Kumiko's character is so well drawn. Yukie, Chosen, they are so well drawn out characters that they become, they transcend any criticisms I might have about how the filmmakers are trying to display or showcase how they actually speak out loud. That, I think, is transcended to the point where their characterizations are leapt off the page, and they're iconic to my eyes. That's one thing. Also, another thing too to keep in mind is that this film is not wholly "quote unquote" anti in terms of a demeaning approach to culture in this way. I mean, I think there's a kind of tempting way to look at how this film treats, say, the idea of honor, and there's this way too about how maybe honor and the samurai class, etc., how this might have some kind of close link, and so this is very important to the Miyagi Sato relationship. But in fact, the film also shows that this idea of honor, at least the Sato version of honor, is not something that all the people in the village espouse and believe. There are people who look at this and think, Sato, you're really going over the edge here. You should calm down. Just calm down, relax, chillax, right? Relax, chillax, right? Sato, chillax. So, right. So that means, therefore, that this idea of honor embedded in maybe some kind of unspoken written rule of samurai bushido or something. It's not something that everyone espouses in the community. So that's one thing. So this is already kind of portraying very different modes of philosophy and outlook in the context of the community, which is, I think, defying any kind of maybe interpretation of this film as, for lack of a better phrase, blanketly racist, which I don't think it is at all. And also you see how aspects of culture go another way. I mean, see how the rock around the clock and 50s rock and roll and rockabilly, these are symbols that are used within the context of how this community, as shown in this film, is seen to regard these aspects of U.S. culture, etc. So this is a film that's embedded in a this is a sequence that's embedded in a story told from the viewpoint of people who are making a film in the mode of the U.S. Hollywood filmmaking machine, of course, right? But I think this part is maybe purposely or not is making, I think, a very astute point in the opposite direction, namely how idea of symbols that are cultural, and I mean this, that are taking symbols that have cultural connections in one area and using them in this specific context that is maybe geographically outside of that area. That is part of what's going on, both within the fabric of the film, as exemplified by this dance sequence, and also as an extension of what we see in the context of the film in terms of how the filmmakers are taking symbols of Japan, symbols of Okinawa culture, at least as it's perceived to be, and trying to integrate them as part of the story. So I see it going both ways. And so that I think is it's a really and I'm not a sociologist or historian, so maybe my comments out or my intuitive sense on this is very muted and quite what's the phrase, not as keenly attuned as it should be. But it's in that way. I can think about it as a kind of two-way street, and then look at it as part of a larger context. So at the end of the day, it doesn't at all offend me. I'm critical about those points, but it doesn't offend me at all. So and that's why I enjoy it thoroughly, very much, the film overall. But yeah. Yeah, that's right. It does happen in other films as well. So it happens in, yeah, as you mentioned as well, it does happen in this and other films. So, and I think it's just I mean it's one of those things that one can take it in that way. It's only a movie. That's another way some people can take it. Or this is something that really should be further explored and investigated. That's another way to put it. And then each film is its own case, its own maybe set of unique circumstances. So, and it might be treated in one way by a certain viewpoint espoused by certain audience members, but it might be treated in a different way by different members of that same audience. So we also have to respect that as well. So if one comes across someone in the context of your own cinema journey, and you talk about Karate Kid Part Two, and that other person for whatever reason feels offended by this film, I respect that very much, but that doesn't permit me from still enjoying this film immensely. And even any reservations that I have about this film does not at all prevent me from being so happy when I hear someone else, like people in the chat here, talk about how much they love this film. So that I think, and that's I think for me the best way I feel most comfortable in operating. So, and because who am I to say how I feel is the same way how you should feel? That's not my place at all. I mean, you feel how you feel with a certain film, and so you know. That's right. The father was speaking in Japanese, and so this sounded to me like this was, yeah, this was because there's also moments in the film where you hear Japanese being spoken, but it feels like maybe it's not like a native Japanese speaker speaking for some of those off-screen moments of language listening. But with the father, yes, it does sound like, yes, the native Japanese speaker, at least to my ears. Yes. Yes, I don't understand what's wrong with how Miyagi speaks. He's playing a person with English as a second language. That's right, but the thing is that he's speaking English as a second language to other characters who are speaking, we understand they have their first language being the same. So, but not in the context of the earlier film, The Karate Kid, which is in that way. My feelings that you've said here, my feelings, your statement mirror exactly how I feel about the first film. Juan says, I think the subject of representation, specifically regarding to language, was done very clever by Tarantino in Glorious Bastards, where actually language and language barriers are ingrained. Yeah, in the plot. Yeah, that's a really good point. Gleaming TV says Miyagi's accent seems genuine. I don't think he was trying to do anything wrong, being a person of Japanese descent himself. No, I don't think so himself. Yes, you're absolutely right. But again, the point is how he speaks to other Japanese characters. So, At least for me, anyway. Yes, David says, put good out in the world and good will come back to you. That's right. So, and also I forgot to say too, which is another thing about I try to be as ambiguous as possible here as well. But this idea of language or speaking does have a way of perhaps being addressed in an indirect or direct way if and when we might see some of these characters, say, in later future subsequent stories or episodes or something. Let's put it that way. So the idea of language and this notion of representation, etc. I think it's quite interesting. And I even I don't. It's kind of a similar thing, and I don't want to get too off track here, but it's kind of a similar thing, which is sometimes the opposite is true. So like I've had certain experiences of my own. People have asked me or said to me, "Oh, you speak good English" or something. So and I always think, "Oh, thank you very much." But I think what is the cause of this kind of comment to be made in the first place? So I mean, and so that kind of idea of maybe expectation and the idea too of what might be perceived to be one way or another. I mean, those sorts of perceptions might be right or wrong or accurate or inaccurate, etc. But it's not. I don't think there is a it's always important also to get a sense of context and where people seem to be coming from. So even now, every so often, if I get that kind of question, I remember when I was very young, I might have been a bit more offended by receiving it, like why would that matter? Well, that kind of thing. But now being a little bit I get maybe sometimes someone says that kind of thing to me, but I'll be, oh, thank you very much, and maybe try to understand where this type of thing comes from, and also be just be how should I put it? Just be grateful for the interest in sort of my background and information details. So I'm always quite. It's always at the end of the day trying to figure out what the perspective is, and I think that watching this film, The Karate Kid Part Two, it's I always am reminded of the fact that there are many different perspectives happening here, and it's also a film that it's not meant to be, as I say, standing in a kind of a representative of all things, one culture or another. So at least I hope it's not. And I don't look at the film and I don't see any signals or signifiers that suggest to me that it feels like it should be. So or taking itself in that way, treating itself in that way. So in that way, I find it at the end of the day, it's about its characters. And as I mentioned before, quite emphatically, but I'll mention again, I think the way that these characters are delineated are so strong, and it transcends all the strengths of the characters, transcend any other type of criticism that I might have about how they might be certain aspects of their background are depicted. So in that way, I think it's a really strong film indeed. But I had to say it. So thank you very much for the comments. Let's see here. And then one says, what do you think about Conti's music in this one? A score that I think is monumental in comparison to the first one, now that we're talking about representation and actors. Yes. Given that Conti incorporated several typical Japanese sounds. Yeah, there's, I don't look at the Conti music, right, in terms of its success rate for me is just its emotional beats. And so I'm not a musicologist and I'm not a historian, so I can't comment into what feels like, what feels quote unquote accurate in terms of instrumentation that's chosen here versus there. But what I can say is I think the music is spectacular, absolutely spectacular. Um, and there is um, uh, the I think the new theme, which is the da 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 da. That's kind of the triumphant new theme, which is the first one da 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 da. So it feels organically connected, but it's also very different, it has its own flavor and feel to it, which I think is great as well. Speaking of music, it was mentioned, I think, at the outset, but we have to say again, the Karate Kid films and the musical song choices that they make are just absolutely stellar. Absolutely stellar. I mean, The Glory of Love is probably one of the best 80s songs in a film ever. Absolutely. And I love how I think sometimes it appears when I think when Daniel and Kumiko are by they're talking about the castle, and they're trying to, like, let's run to the castle, Daniel, and whoever makes it first will have their wish be granted, and something. And they're actually running across uh, rock faces that if you slipped, you could probably injure yourself. So that's pretty dangerous in terms of a date. I mean, if I wanted to take someone to a date, probably I wouldn't ask them to run across the beach, the jagged coast, rocky coastline to the deserted castle there. But again, I'm not as romantic as Daniel or Kumiko, so maybe I don't fit into their world directly. Which is, but at the same time, I love their story. So. In any event, yeah. So, what was I saying? Yeah. So, the glory of, I think, appears somewhere scattered about throughout the soundtrack, but not directly. But I think it's really great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely fantastic. You're absolutely right. Yes, the Moody Blue song during ice breaking scene. Whoever chose that is a genius. Yes, the bar sequence overall, I think, is it's really quite a remarkable one indeed. And so we have the although I have to point out one thing about the ice breaking scene, not the one. I mean, the musical choice is great, and the ambiance is great and clever, and let's see. We have the scene where the all the sheets are placed into the rack there. Okay, so uh, all right. So a lot of questions here. So first of all, okay. So the idea is he has to break all the sheets, which is a really hard thing to do. I think one or two sheets is hard enough, because we see the one of the people trying to do it before Daniel tries it, and he hurts his hand. He's unable to do, I think, past the first or second, I forget. But it's six seems to be a almost impossible, near impossible feat. But he does the concentration with Mr. Miyagi, and he puts on the bet. And Sato's there, and Chosen is there, and you've got to place the bet. Chosen is a bit scared to go all the way with the money, but he's backed by Sato, who's super super rich, as we know. And Miyagi is almost seemingly cavalier in going in all the way in terms of betting on Daniel in this way. But he's confident, or he appears to be. So he takes his time with it. So here's the thing. So he takes his. Of course, Daniel succeeds, and it's concentration and taking time. But there are a couple of things here. He took his time. He took his time with the concentration, right? So that was probably a good technique, because the more time he takes, the more I would assume that the ice is melting. I mean, every second counts. So the more that the ice is exposed out in the open, the more it is likely to melt and thus soften. And so the more he's concentrating, actually, the more it's softening, I'm assuming, especially considering what I assume to be the temperature of Okinawa at the time. So it's not a cold place. It's actually quite warm in terms of its climate. At least last time I went there. And so understanding that climate meant that maybe even in the room there would be a considerable amount of heat. So the more he's waiting, actually, the more chances are available to him that he'll break the entire ice sheets, because they'd be that much softer. Okay, so that's one thing. But anyway, it might go into that theory that has I think, been part of the conversation, the lexicon of Karate Kid theories and discussions, even prior to Karate Kid 3 and the next Karate Kid, I mean Cobra Kai, which is how much is Daniel actually manipulating the situation. And so I personally think that Daniel is one of the great characters. But yeah, there's a little bit here where it's like, yeah, if I were there, I'd take as much time as I would as well, which is also part of what one might call the Miyagi-Do technique, right? Which is trying to take, and I don't mean this as cheating, but I mean this in terms of trying to attack using a subterfuge or some kind of way that is out in the open, but no one is really thinking about. And that's probably what's going on here as well, maybe unspoken. But it's absolutely brilliant, by the way. It's totally fair game, fair play. Very, very smart tactically. Danny says, when Daniel and Kumiko run to the castle featuring, yes, the terrifying ballad, or take you to my castle Farlow. Yes, well done. Yes. Jason says, the Orientalism of Hollywood scores is so deeply ingrained, arguably continues to this day with something like Zimmer's Dune music. It's actually impressive how relatively non-cringe is Conti's score. That's an interesting point, but as I say, I'm not a musicologist, but I don't look at this score at all as a kind of maybe overt and seemingly inappropriate doses of maybe Orientalism or that, as you I think point out as well here. I don't see it. I don't look at it that way, or I don't hear it that way. But maybe I could be missing something, or maybe it's due to the impressive nature of the score itself. I would probably side with the latter for my own personal benefit, but that's a good point. And picking up on what was mentioned earlier by Juan. So thank you very much, Jason. Thank you, Juan. Yeah, Juan. Yes, thank you. Good point about the melting. Yes, that's right. Thank you very much. Danny says, Chosen travels from Sato's dojo to the ice-breaking barn 10 seconds with a complete change of wardrobe. Yes, that's right. That's right. Because he was teaching the class, and then he was teaching the class, and Daniel and Kumiko are seen looking in through the glass, but he didn't notice them. But only when he entered the bar, one of Chosen's part of the friends or something, he's seen. And he walks out. So then the idea is that maybe Chosen comes in. So Chosen probably can dress really. I mean, I don't know. I go to the gym. I swim. I do weights, but I'm sometimes pressed for time, and so I think I can change. I think I can change my clothes in. I mean, it's gonna be pushing it a bit. I think I can do a quick change of clothes in under a minute. I don't know, but we'll see. But it's a good point. It's a good point. Also, I love the bit there about how Mr. Miyagi was repairing the refrigerator, and there's a part or something. So I love the aside comment about how their Kumiko and Daniel are walking on the street there in the town. And he's like, "Oh, where's Mr. Miyagi?" Oh, and he's got to repair the refrigerator, but maybe he has to come into town and find them. Oh, the parts shop is here, so we might run into each other. That's exactly what we need, because otherwise we would be totally surprised when we see Yukie and Mr. Miyagi actually enter into the bar at just the right time, just before they get into this whole thing with the ice sheets. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, Gleaming TV. I love Sato's voice in this film. He reminded me of Yakuza. Yeah, that's right. His voice is so menacing. It's so perfect, and I love that too, because it's not just overly powering and menacing. The bit where he's when he's realized in the storm, after Mr. Miyagi has saved him from the beam of wood, which is, I don't know if it's the same beam of wood that they found on the beach together that time, right? Which he's trying to break, but I think it's probably one of the beams of the ceiling or something. But it's meant to, I think, symbolize this beam of wood that they found as friends on the beach that time, Miyagi and Sato, right? I think. And we see him essentially trying to break this beam over and over again in his very beautiful garden. And then when the storm comes, we see Sato trapped under this big piece of wood. And Miyagi's about to go like this, and oh, this is how you're a coward. You can, everyone's gonna know you're a coward in front of the entire village, and he thinks he's gonna kill him. He breaks the beam of wood, and then I love the bit where after he breaks the wood, you see Miyagi so kind of deflated because he's used so much energy to break this huge piece of wood to save, and he calls him, "Come, my old friend, Sato, my old friend," he says, which I love that moment. It's kind of a bit of an aside. That's one of the things about the Karate Kid films. The dialogue that's, what is it? It's like like added in post, kind of. That sort of stuff is really very important. That's, I think, is just as important and iconic as, get him a body bag in the first film, the Karate Kid, the first film at the end there. But this, my old friend, Sato, old friend. This is such a great, great, great moment here. And then when Sato realizes the error of his ways, and he's, "No, let me do this," right? And he goes out and helps Daniel with the young girl after he saved the girl from the tower that's about to fall on the thing. And he comes back and he's all smiling to Daniel, and he comes back, and even when he's realized the error of his ways, his voice, the tenor hasn't quite changed, but you can tell that there is now regret and a deep sense of almost sadness in his voice. When he says to Chosen, "To you, I am dead," or "I was wrong," when he says at the festival at the very end, his voice is still guttural and from the heart, which I love. It's just, there's this menace to it that also conveys a sense of pain, because you also know Sato is a man filled with a lot of pain. That's the thing too about the Karate Kid films, which I think actually is done to great effect. Again, when we see post Karate Kid 2 stories as well, but during this we understand that it's all about perspective, right? And so the story as we see from Miyagi's perspective is one way, and then we understand that how he thought what happened actually wasn't what happened at all, because he thought, right, maybe Yukie had married, and Yukie but Yukie, we understand, never married, and that she maybe her feelings for Miyagi never changed. We understand when Miyagi left Okinawa and he went to the U.S., went to Hawaii, according to his biography, as we understand from his right, and then he met his wife, and then the tragedy that befell them occurred when he was away fighting in the war. So he has this life, right? But we understand that maybe Yukie might have had her own life as well, but maybe, according to what she says, she hasn't changed in that regard, which is itself a type of this idea of Miyagi thinking one way about a situation, but in fact the situation is quite different. So from his perspective, it's one way. From Yukie's perspective, it's another way. And then from Sato's perspective, it's another way too. And it's not like Sato is, I used the word villainous at one point, but Sato's not a villain. He is, I think, I mentioned he's Shakespearean. This is a great Shakespearean drama done in that way. And it goes back also to even Shakespeare. You can make Shakespeare comments about this idea about, for lack of a better phrase, cultural appropriation. I mean, a lot of that happens too in Shakespeare, and so and that doesn't make it any better or worse. But I'm just saying, you can make those parallel discussions there. So it doesn't stop just at Karate Kid Part 2. But that idea of parallelism and Shakespeare also occurs with the characters, because the story between Sato and Miyagi and Yukie, this is huge. This is absolutely huge, and this is the stuff that you understand why Sato has spent all of his life feeling this way, and you can also understand how this is it feels like a wasted effort, and you can feel that deflation in his look when he realizes that Chosen, his prized student, is not the hero that he would have otherwise liked to have regarded him. And so this becomes, I think, such a huge moment. And that is so... I mentioned how the first film and the second film, I think, are really... Sometimes I think I like the first film more than the second film. But in this way, if you were to make a parallel between, say, Sato in this film and Kreese in the first film, I know maybe it's an unfair comparison because they're really different characters, but just purely on the basis of master or sensei level, because Sato is the sensei level here. If you look at it in that perspective, I would say that Kreese, at least in the context of the first Karate Kid film, Kreese is painted in a way that is in a certain direction. But I would say Sato, we're given more of an understanding of who Sato is, at least directly. And so there is room, I think, to understand the arc of Sato's transformation as he goes from one quote unquote villainous part of his story arc at the start of the film, arguably, to a almost glorious transformation. To now he's smiling and dancing with everyone. Even in the storm, there's a moment when he carries the girl that has just been rescued, and it's a storm and everyone's like it's falling and rain and everything, but he takes a moment and he picks up the girl and he looks at Danny and he smiles. I love that moment so much. So but maybe I'm speaking too much ahead of myself, and it's an unfair advantage to Kreese, the character, Martin Kove's Kreese character. We might see some really interesting developments with Kreese, even when we get to a discussion of Karate Kid Part 3 and maybe beyond. But in any event, my point here, I should take a step back. Maybe again, it's unfair to compare Sato to Kreese, but my point is that at least in Karate Kid Part 2, we get a really strong arc with Sato. Really, really strong. So he's I think he's a great character. Absolutely great. And his voice is so perfect. And his sunglasses. Oh, and his suits. Oh, he's so great. Like, he's the one at the funeral. Everyone's wearing, I think, traditional mourning wear, except Daniel, who's got a white shirt on because, right, he's right, and then also Sato, who's wearing his suit as well, but he's, oh my gosh, wow, what a character. Sato, what a character. So great. Sato's voice is so commanding and quite intimidating. I agree. I absolutely agree. Is the one dude that scene Papa Maru is so great. Yes, oh gosh, so fantastic. What a great performance by Pat Morita. Again. You didn't need me to tell you this, but his performance is magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. Miyagi is so glad to have saved his friend, his brother. That's right. They are spiritual brothers in terms of the connection between them and Miyagi's father and the teaching of Miyagi karate. This is such an important, so important. Yeah. Oh my gosh. While the storm might be considered a deus ex machina, I love how the scene showed the transformation of Sato. It was a fact. I agree. Yes, it was a bit like, we've got to go. Sato, the mourning period is over now. Sato is demanding that we fight, etc. But now, but now then the storm comes and everything, right? And then it's also a way of cleansing things. But you're right. It is a story. You're absolutely right. It's a story. And it's like a fairy tale in a one way, or it's a mode of entertaining. It's a sequence that's interesting, but also these types of storms are not uncommon. But in terms of the plot points, yes, it does come at a certain point and allows for in terms of respecting the three act structure. You're absolutely right. Yeah. If the film had been named something other than The Karate Kid Part 2, it would have been regarded more of a classic. That's an interesting, yeah, maybe. Although, I would say, too, even in this time, the Part 2 moniker, I think, was not something that was looked down upon. This was still in the era post Godfather Part 2. So, but again, maybe you're right. I think you have very good, healthy outlook on this. Much better than, much more accurate than I. Oh, we do. Yes, that's right. Watching dancing on the TV in the shop window. Yes, that's right. And when he's showing, that's right. Kumiko's waiting for the dance program to show him what her dream is. Yes, Gleaming TV. I didn't understand Miyagi's backstory. I thought his wife and newborn child died in Part 1. Part 2, he had a different backstory. Right? Exactly right. So this is also something that I kind of referred to earlier, which is it is a different set of characters. We understand. But it is possible, I think, it is possible for someone in one's life to have loved more than one person. It is possible, and it does go to the storyline. But in terms of where he comes from and his father, whom he does mention in the first film. But you're absolutely right too. The Yukie storyline and the storyline involving his wife and his child in the first film that's referred to in his first film. These are different people. That's my understanding, and so it does, in a way, perhaps, possibly diminish or potentially possibly diminish the impact of that scene or those circumstances as we see them depicted in the first film when we understand what the storyline of the second film is. It does have that possibility. That's for sure. But there's again another way to look at it, which is possibly anyway, which is within the scope of one's life, many people can be met, and you can have certain feelings about many different people, etc. So I think that that's also possible. But again, absolutely fair point. And so it's also possible to look at Karate Kid 2 as being almost maybe retroactively not quite fitting all the puzzle pieces that were established in the first one. That is definitely possible. Absolutely. Oh, hello, my dear friend Luke. Yes, thank you. I really love this one, but even if it's nowhere near as strong as the first. Getting to spend an entire film with Daniel Miyagi together is just so enjoyable. Yes. I'd love to talk about it properly. Yes, yes, definitely. Yes, drop me a line. Definitely. I've also seen he met his wife after he left Okinawa. That never crossed my mind. That's right. He did. He did. So at least that's that. I think that's the storyline. That's my understanding of the story. We don't quite get the. We don't get the. You can. I think there. You can find it online in terms of the biography of Mr. Miyagi, but in terms of what we get from the films themselves, it's not quite clear, although I think that's the most logical explanation based on the circumstance that we know from watching the films themselves. At least that's my understanding. That's right. But Gleaming TV, I agree with you about that point. And so it actually that point, if you look at it in terms of that the whole entirety of the backstory of Miyagi sign or Mr. Miyagi in the second film, if you look at that as perhaps potentially diminishing the impact of the Miyagi character as shown in the first film, then I think that's a similar line, which I'm also I think I think is a very reasonable line to take. It's a similar line as showing us how much Ali had been such an impact in the first film to be very almost unceremoniously brushed aside in the very opening moments of the second film. So I think it has that same or similar type of vibe to it. So, but you know, we meet Ali in the first film, and then we meet Kumiko in the second film. So in that way, from Daniel's perspective, we as viewers might be willing to understand that in the scope of Daniel's life, he's able to meet different people and have feelings for different people that he meets along the way, but still in a way that maybe is part of his own character arc, and perhaps in that way, subtly or maybe unsubtly, that's something that could be said for Mr. Miyagi as well. If we were to understand that Yuki and Miyagi's son's wife are two different people. Incidentally, too, I also like the parallel between Miyagi and Daniel and how they converge, but also differ in that. Remember, the whole point about Miyagi and Sato in their past was that Sato wanted to confront Miyagi in terms of his relationship with Yukie, but and that they essentially challenged him to a duel, but Miyagi left before the challenge could be met. And so, whereas here, Danielson is very much directly, perhaps forced by circumstances, I admit, but still very directly, he is allowed to, or he accepts the challenge of Chosen at the very end. So, which is an interesting, almost role reversal. He's accepting the challenge of Chosen in a way that Miyagi didn't directly accept the challenge of Sato in their paths. I'm not saying which one is better than the other, but I'm saying it's an interesting, almost role reversal in a manner of speaking. It's almost mimicking or paralleling the role reversal that we had seen, arguably earlier on when Daniel's consoling Miyagi after the death of Miyagi's father out there on the coast there with the sun, and it's almost that like friend to friend, brother to brother, or almost even switching roles in terms of father and son, because Miyagi and Daniel in the first film, it was like friend to friend, but also Miyagi-san was almost like a fatherly figure, not just an avuncular figure, but also very directly a fatherly figure as well. But now in this film, in some ways, the roles sometimes become reversed, which I think is a really interesting change. It's again showing the dynamism of their relationship, which is the heart and soul of this film, which what makes it a success. One says, I like how all the Miyagi story, even if Daniel's not aware of it, it's like a life lesson to Daniel. Yes, I agree. I agree. Yes, there's more than high school. Yes, Daniel has impressive game. Yes. Yeah, you know, I didn't mention it in the first live stream discussion, but when like how he's able to strike up a conversation with Ali on the beach there with the soccer ball and kicking their kneeing the soccer ball. I thought that was really great. So, um, you know, um, yeah, fantastic. Your thoughts on Chosen's performance? I thought he was great the way he looks and carried himself. Yeah, I mentioned may have mentioned it earlier in the live stream, but I thought yeah, Chosen is one of the great characters, absolutely in terms of his physicality, which I was mentioning in terms of the predator bicep scene. Very much so, and I like when he shakes Daniel's hand like, "Oh, welcome to Okinawa." Shaking my hand. Oh, I like, yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, oh, that's great. Absolutely great. He's so, but he's also very sensitive, and he's not. He's filled with a lot of imperfections, and he's prone to, he's got the backing of his own of Sato, right? But he's got so maybe he's a bit letting that get to his head too much. So in any event, yeah, yeah. So all right. So gosh, is it that time already? It's now 11:54. So I have to go at 12 my time. So I've got to go very soon. But we can keep this going for a few more minutes and then I have to stop. So any last minute comments? Sorry, there's a lot that I kind of wanted to get off my chest about this. So um, I love also Chosen's the what he wears. It's and I remember as a kid watching Chosen, and he's so physically imposing, and just he's very muscular, very low body fat percentage appears, just incredibly lean and muscular, incredible. So and yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I skipped over a comment. Yes. Juan says, years later, I've come to see Chosen as a negative mirror of Daniel. Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yes, that's right. Um, Chosen can get very aggressive. He's there with the knife, and when he's confronting Daniel at the dance hall with Kumiko there, and about the money that Chosen says, you scammed me out of my money. I'm going to get it back. That kind of thing because of the ice bet. There's some pretty kind of unpleasant suggestions that are made in terms of Kumiko, who's there, and they've got her, hand over the, one of the Chosen's friends. It's actually quite uncomfortable. But Daniel and Kumiko are able to get out of that situation unscathed, which is good. So Chosen, I think, does display these moments of almost a chaotic risk, and he's confronted by that at the very end, even at the point of death for Chosen. When Daniel says, "Live or die, man," he chooses death. He says, "Die." Honk or honk. I'm sorry, honk. Okay. So anyway, not to get too sidetracked, but did you ever play Karate Kid game for NES growing up? It's kind of sucks, but it does an okay job loosely adapting the first two movies. Presentation was. I never owned it. I think my friend had it, but I never owned it. I think I was a bit unimpressed with it at the time of playing it. Maybe that's why. But I do remember, but not unfortunately not too much of the details. All right, I have to go in about a couple minutes, so let's end it here. So thank you so much. I'm so sorry. I'm kind of ending it in a kind of maybe unceremonious manner. I hope it's not too unceremonious. I hope it's not like oh, Ali busted the brakes of the car, that kind of thing. So because I really love this movie, I really do, and criticisms and all, I love this movie, and I hope that has come across in the course of this conversation. And is it ha or honk? That will always haunt me to my dying days, and I mean that sincerely. But in any event, thank you so much. Any last minute comments or questions? I want to thank everyone who's able to stop by. Sean and Danny and Juan and Gleaming TV and Razor Wire and Komodo and Jason. Oh, thank you so much. If I missed your name, I apologize. Vern, thank you for showing a time capsule. Timothy, thank you. for showing up. I really appreciate Seth. If you're still here, thank you so much. Matt and others, thank you, thank you, thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it. Again, it's at the end of the day, this is still one of the most iconic films in my cinema loving life. It came at a really important time for me in the 80s, and I still cherish it so much. And I have so much fun with it. I find it moving and Shakespearean and frustrating at some points. Yes, I grant you that, but I'm very happy to have this film with any frustration or criticism that I might have. At the end of the day, I have so much fun with it. And so it is, for me, one of the best examples of my own 80s film journey. I'm so happy that it's still here. So, Karate Kid Part 2, that's the discussion today. So I'm sorry I have to cut it short, but we have to go soon. Next, in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about Karate Kid Part 3. So we're going to be talking about Karate Kid Part 3. That's the last Saturday in March. So if you're interested, I know that's a bit of a... I mean, talking about, the Karate Kid part, that's another film that I also saw in the theater. So if you're interested to talk about Karate Kid Part 3 with me, we will have that discussion in 2 weeks. So the last Saturday of March. So if you're interested, please stop by this channel. And we'll continue the conversation about that film. But thank you very much, my dear friends. Let us end the chat today with a little bit of I'm gonna say a line from the movie, and then please respond in the comments, and then I'll try to respond in kind as well. So thank you so much, my dear friends, for stopping by and for allowing me to hear your thoughts about this film, Karate Kid Part 2. Let's continue the conversation. If you want to talk more Karate Kid Part 2 with me, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'll do my best to respond. But until the next one, my dear friends, have a great rest of your day. Have a great Saturday, excuse me. Have a great Saturday and also Sunday tomorrow. And then we'll go from there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And so, my dear friends, all right, live or die, man. Live or die. Live or die. Let me know in the comments. Live or die, man. What's your choice? Anyone taking it? No? Live or die? Wrong. Honk! All right. That's honk. All right, there we go. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So with that, yes, which is, I think, the best answer. So, yes, if anyone says die, wrong answer. The answer is, in fact, honk. So, my dear friends, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you at the next one. So, have a great weekend. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you. Okay. Oh, still on. Am I still on? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, my dear friends. Honk.